begin the show, we are going to start off with a few words from our fantastic and amazing president and founder, Dr. Darrel Ray. Darrel, welcome back to 2024.
Yeah, Happy New Year. I wanted to take a minute, Kara, of your time, everybody's time, to say Happy New Year to everybody. But most importantly, I want to say something. Kara and Nikki and Helen, Glinda, Rob, Jason, these people are running RfRx every Monday night, 51 weeks a year. And they get very little thank for this. I just want to take a minute and say thank you so much for all the work and effort. And could we put a hand together and give a clap to all of them? I can't tell you how many hours of work it takes to put this show on right now. I mean, just to get a 1 or 2 hour show on probably takes 10 hours of work every week or more. I mean, I may be underestimating, but anyway, I just think these folks need lots and lots of recognition because they're making a huge difference in a lot of people's lives. And this is one of our main outreach efforts. I don't know how many people have found this show and have told us, wow, the content has made a big difference. And I may have missed some people. I don't know. Kara, did I miss anybody that should be thanked?
Oh man, we've got tons of people that help us out. You
Yeah.
named a lot of our main people, but on top of that, we've got people that sometimes pop in and support with the Hangouts. We've got all of our post-production team. We've got our social media team, Shannon. We've got Phil, we talked about earlier. There's
Yeah.
whole teams of people actually behind all of this stuff that help us out every week, getting the word out and getting the product out online, not to mention the people who field questions and calls and send recommendations over to us. So yes, it's a whole lot. But
Okay. Well,
thank you
I'm
for
sorry to
saying that.
those I didn't catch or did overlooked anybody. It just takes a whole organization to make this one program work, and we appreciate all your work. All right, back to you, Kara.
Oh, thank you. Well, I appreciate you saying that. I am so glad that I get to be here every week and see all of you fine people and also get to enjoy the content myself every single week. It's great. It kind of it's almost like reading a book but better because you get to also interact with the person. But okay, back to it. Yeah, we had 1 week off and I really missed it last week. It was nice to have a break, but
I was
also
off.
yeah.
It screwed me up. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, do I have offer? I'm like, oh no, I don't. It's Christmas. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it was kind of weird. It was
Yeah,
weird.
it was a little weird.
So we're glad to be back. And I'm glad that so many people have come back again this week.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming back and not forgetting about us. So we're definitely glad to see y'all. Yeah, my week feels weird when we don't have it.
So now I'm going to introduce us to our first guest, who is a familiar face around here, our friend Rob Palmer, who is a retired aerospace engineer who enjoys country western and square dancing with his wife for over 40 years. He enjoys sci-fi on his own. Rob was raised a Roman Catholic and endured 12 years of Catholic school. It's so dynastic. He became a skeptical activist 8 years ago when he joined the Guerrilla Skeptics on the Wikipedia project, which works to improve the accuracy of Wikipedia articles on controversial topics. In 2018, he was hired as a columnist by the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, and his column in the Skeptical Inquirer is called The Well-Known Skeptic. Rob joined RfR at the beginning of the pandemic and has taken on many roles, including helpline agent, volunteer interviewer, helpline agent, instructor, ambassador, OC Hangout host, and RfRx Hangout host and co-host. He has also given many RfRx talks, but fears he will never catch up to the number of appearances by David Teachout. All of Rob's activist work, Skeptical and Humanist, is collected on his Linktree page, which Cara will post into the chat. So, everybody, let's say hello to Rob. Hi, Rob.
Hello.
Again.
Hey, Rob.
So what do you want to
Welcome to
know
the show.
first? We're going through a list here, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess we can do everyone's bio and then launch into stories. Or would it make more sense, Rob? Do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story, and then we'll introduce each person as we go
Hmm,
along?
that's
Does
a good
that make a
question.
little more sense?
I don't know. I think I like the first option better because if they chime in, people will know who they are.
Okay, well then hold that thought. We'll read
Okay.
our other introductions, and then we're going to come back to Rob to
Okay.
hear a little bit more about your story.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
All right, you're
Okay.
up, Cara.
Okay, well, next up we have with us Rachel, who is a motorcycle riding ballroom dance teacher from rural Texas. Hey, my home state. And married with 2 adult children, Rachel was raised in Christian Science, but drifted off as a teenager. She explored Scientology, law of attraction, and a variety of Protestant churches before settling comfortably into atheism. Since joining RfR in late 2020, Rachel has come to view this community as a core part of her life. She has become friends with many of her fellow volunteers and loves the opportunity to grow her peer support and leadership skills. You may have seen her hosting the women's support group, posting in the online community as Spinouette, or at the fall excursion. Yay, Rachel!
Yay.
It's so good to see you again. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's so neat to see everybody. Gosh, it's great.
Yes.
I'm
I love
excited.
this. We're having a
Yeah,
little
this is
reunion this
wonderful.
week. Okay, well, moving on real quickly, we'll come back to Rachel in a little bit too. Helen, would you like to introduce our next guest?
So I'm going to introduce our prolific RfRx speaker. David Teachout is a mental health therapist and mentor, teaching principles of how creativity intersects with mental flexibility to work through life struggles. David grew up a Christian fundamentalist, attending a Bible college and receiving a bachelor's in theology and psychology. During his studies there, David deconverted and has been exploring the creation of meaning and purpose ever since. David has a master's in both forensic psychology and counseling psychology and is currently at work on a doctorate in clinical psychology. David has been working within the field of David has been working within the field of psychology for almost 20 years. David maintains a blog at lifeweasings.substack.com and a podcast at humanitiesvalues.com, which Cara will also put in the chat. And all these links will be in the doobly-doo when this goes
Yes.
up online. So, just it will all be there. Hi, David.
Good evening. Yes, in the
Welcome
doobly-doo.
back.
The
Yes,
doobly-doo.
in the doobly-doo.
Yeah, but you have to do the hand
Yes.
gesture. It's
You
not
gotta,
accurate.
you gotta, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Without this, it's meaningless.
Without it won't exist.
Yes. I also just want to say hi to David's books as well. I'm glad to see them too. I'm looking forward to add to my 2024
books.
reading list.
Yep, I just put my Goodreads, good, reading.
The reading challenge.
Challenge up
Yes.
for aiming for 150. So we'll see.
Wow.
I'm just
I'm
aiming for
impressed.
like 2.
I did not meet my reading challenge in 2023, but that's okay. We can start over every year and try again. So I'm looking forward to watching David surpass my reading list again this year on Goodreads. Okay, well, we'll come back to David in just a minute as well. Let me introduce our next guest. We have 5 total. Next, we have Emily, who is from Kentucky. She grew up Mormon and joined the Recovering from Religion online community in March 2018 after reaching out to the helpline. Later, she began her volunteer journey as a helpline agent in June 2019. Since then, she's also become a support group leader and an ambassador. In addition to Recovering from Religion, Emily is involved with her local American Atheists chapter and Secular Student Alliance when she was a student. Emily graduated college in April. Congratulations. And now works in public accounting as a tax accountant and auditor. Wow. Well, congratulations and welcome, Emily.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. And you may notice that Emily is sitting next to Eric, our 5th guest. Helen, would you like to introduce Eric?
Yes, Eric is from Oregon. He was raised Mormon as well and was a missionary for about 5 months. The mission triggered a faith crisis when he was 20 years old, which led to gradually losing all religious belief over the course of the following year. Since the process was painful for him, Eric wanted to volunteer for recovering from religion to give others going through similar things that he went through the resources that he didn't have. Starting out as a helpline agent, he eventually took part in training new agents and even leading as the helpline director for a few years. He's also hosted support groups and moderated the online community. Now he's one of the co-directors of the program services team, where he has used his background in computer science to lead a team of web developers that develop web apps to help RfR's other volunteers. So let's say hi to Eric. Hi, Eric.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
Welcome. We are glad to have you. And I am so excited to get to talk with all of y'all today. I cannot wait to dive into this. So, Helen and I have talked for a lot now. We want to hear from all of you. So, let's get started. The way this is going to go is each of the guests are going to talk about their story in the order we introduced them. And we'll go over a few questions with each of them. And if you have questions for the guests while they're speaking, don't forget to put those in the chat and we'll answer those next. So, Rob, you are first up. Can you tell us a little bit about your deconversion story?
I can do that. So Happy New Year to everybody. So yeah, I think I'm the oldest person on this panel by a bit, and I deconverted at a fairly young age. So putting all that together, I can say I deconverted way back when Homo sapiens still were being attacked by Neanderthals. So being a card-carrying skeptic, and yes, I have a business card that actually says skeptic on it, I'm also very aware that memory is very unreliable. I've even given a talk that included that concept to RfRx. So everyone should take everything I say now about my past with a whole shaker full of salt, because I'm talking about a long time ago. I attended Catholic school from first grade on. And so by the time I got confirmed, I already had many years of Catholic indoctrination. But Catholic indoctrination at that time, luckily, didn't involve anything about the nonsense of a young Earth or a young universe, or that evolution didn't happen and Adam and Eve were real. So that seems like a really good thing, because I was very into science and I didn't have to deal with that cognitive dissonance about like real world facts and what the Bible was telling me. But on the other hand, I just accepted the doctrinal things that they did teach, which had no proof or clear, easy way to disprove, like Jesus's resurrection, the Trinity, the Bible was the inspired word of God. I just accepted that. I had no reason to doubt those things were true because all the people I knew were Catholic, right? I went to Catholic school. My family was Catholic, right? Most people around me. And plus, believe it or not, there was no internet. There was no easy way to find alternative views. There was no YouTube. I did have some Jewish friends, but they were clearly just plain wrong and hadn't caught up to the fact that Jesus was their Messiah. I didn't know any Muslims or Hindus. I'm not even sure if I knew there was such a thing at the time. I didn't know any Protestants. I guess, and I just assumed that Protestants, I knew about them, were just wrong because they were raised in the wrong faith, unlike me, right? So sometime in my mid-teens, there was a pivotal event, and my cat is not going to let me ignore her. Come here, Peggy Sue.
We should have introduced your cat as
Yes.
well. She's attended and contributed
That's
some
Peggy Sue.
as well.
So there was a pivotal event when I was a teenager, and I don't even know the date. I don't have this written down anywhere. I think I was maybe 15, 16, something like that. A traveling evangelical pastor paid a visit to the neighborhood where all of my family lived. I had a large Italian American, all Catholic extended family. 3 pairs of aunts and uncles. Some of them had 6 kids each, a bunch of first cousins. One of the adults went to the service held by that pastor, and they converted to evangelical Christianity almost immediately. They invited other family members because they wanted to save them, and almost everyone who attended got converted. So my parents and their 3 kids, so that's my 1 brother and 1 sister, we were the only ones who escaped. So in a very short period, the family got split into about 20 evangelicals and just a handful of the old style remaining Catholics. At every family gathering from that point on for years, the rest of the growing family, by the way, that people in their 20s started having kids, raising them as evangelicals, wanted to save us Catholics. They told us they had superpowers. They could speak God's words, heal the sick, possibly, but they told me they could raise the dead if it was necessary. I finally relented and agreed to go to a service where I, for the first time, witnessed people being slain in the spirit. I think that's the term, Cara. And speaking in tongues.
Yep.
I was freaked out. And by the way, the message at the service I went to, directly from God, as translated by the pastor through the woman who was speaking in tongues, was that the congregation wasn't donating enough money to the church and needs to up their ante. Yeah. So the Almighty
Of course,
created the
because
universe.
God
Of
cares
course
about
we will.
money.
But the thing that really frightened me was, he had such a hold over these people that I believed if he said, they're building a Hindu temple down the road, you need to go burn it down, they would have wanted to do it. And maybe some would have. That was frightening to see the control he had over them. I just became even more sure after watching that they were all gullible. Anyway, but they're telling me that all their practices come from the Bible. But that's the same book that the Catholic Church used to construct its doctrine. And then it dawned on me that there's no way to know for sure which interpretation of that one book is correct. So the more likely explanation, I didn't know the term at the time, but it's Occam's razor. The simplest answer is correct. It's all made up. So I realized that pretty quickly. So in the short term, I dropped all my belief in the specific Catherine doctrine. I think it took a few more years for me to totally give up the idea that there is actually a God somewhere, and maybe Jesus was God too. There was no internet, as I said, and there was no easy way to research any of this stuff. So I felt like I was thinking of all this on my own, and maybe for the first time any person had. It's very weird. And it took me a while to go from that to saying I'm agnostic. I don't know if I knew what that word meant either, but that I'm not sure. And then maybe transitioning into a deist. It probably was a few more years for me somehow to learn the word atheist, and I became comfortable describing myself that way to myself. It's not like talked about it to anybody else. But I'm certainly glad I didn't go down the path of many who feel uncomfortable with that conclusion and go searching for the truth in another religion or many other religions, as we know some people do, before often coming to the same conclusion that I did, that none of it is probably real. So in my opinion, trying to figure out which religion, if any, is real is just a huge waste of time, and it's wasting the limited lifetime that we actually know we have. So regarding trauma, luckily the Catholic Church didn't preach rapture, as you know, Helen, right? I didn't have any anxiety about, everyone disappearing and I'm going to be left behind. But all my relatives believe that. And when I was a believer also, I felt like if I didn't kill anybody, as long as I didn't miss confession too much, I'm not going to hell. So I wasn't really worried about burning in hell either. So I didn't suffer a lot of religious trauma when I left this. Although it was nice as a teenage boy to stop thinking that a supernatural being was watching everything I did all the time. Everything. Regarding this construction, that's been going on my entire life, I would say. Although, frankly, I had never heard that word until joining RfR as a volunteer. I knew deconversion, but I didn't know about deconstruction. And I guess, all of one's beliefs are shaped not only by your religion, but by the culture you're raised in. So I had all the typical beliefs, including abortion's murder, being anything but straight is just plain wrong, or at least once I didn't believe it was a sin, at least it's a human malfunction. It's not right. And I've found that beliefs about those kinds of things change over your lifetime as you have occasion to think about it and you're exposed to things that you hadn't really ever thought about yourself. You can think about what is actually moral or immoral and what's clearly right or wrong. And that's my story on that front.
That is really interesting. Rob, you have been on the show several times, and I don't think I knew all of those parts of your story before. Thank you for sharing
I don't often talk about it in public. I was actually interviewed on a podcast by someone we've had on RfRx many years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Phil Ferguson. He does the Phil Ferguson show. And
oh, yeah.
We were supposed to be on to talk about a talk I had done at SciCon, but he asked me about my deconversion. So I told him a little bit about this because his show, the Phil Ferguson show, is a very weird mix of financial advice, because that's what he does for a living, and skepticism and humanism. And yeah, it was an interesting report, but that may be the only time I've ever talked about this publicly before.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. And let's keep going around the table. I'm really excited to hear everyone's stories here tonight, and we'll come back to Rob again for our next question. But let's go to Rachel next. Rachel, can you tell us a little bit about your deconversion?
Yeah, let me pull up my notes and so I don't talk too long. So as I said earlier, I was or as Kara said earlier, I was raised in Christian Science, which not a lot of people know very much about, but it's not like a big, there's not a lot of hellfire. I didn't have a lot of trauma. It was really very sort of chill and quiet. But even so, I had doubts as early as like 7 or 8 years old. I remember questioning. And they, recurred throughout, like you'd kind of forget about it for a while and they would recur and something would come up and I go, that kind of doesn't quite make sense, but then I'd forget about it. Mostly it was like this cultural pressure, right? I grew up in Texas. And so around here, it's like, it's just sort of assumed that everyone believes in God. And if you, if you don't, if you say you don't believe in God, people look at you like you've just admitted to being a psychopath or like an axe murderer. Like there's just, why would you ever say that? It's a crazy thing to be, right? I think that might be changing a little bit, but I'm in an even smaller town now in Texas, and it's even more like that here now than it was when I was growing up. But it, you know, it it was just like this cultural pressure. You just sort of accept it because everybody believes it, and you go, okay, I guess it must be right. And but as I got older, even though I got married, had kids, I had a job, and life started to get hard, and I thought, well, these religious people are also confident. Like I feel like I don't know how to live my life in a way that is going to be safe and like that things are going to go well for me. Like there's no handbook to life, right? There's nobody saying this is how you live your life, and if you do these things everything will be okay. It's just scary. And so I thought, well, maybe one of these people kind of has it figured out a little bit. So I started looking around, and I got sucked into some stuff. Like, I mean, none of it was really deep, but just stupid stuff, things that I look back on now and I'm embarrassed. We went to a bunch of churches trying to find like the right Protestant church to attend, and some of them were okay and some of them were awful. Um, and then, we actually went to the Church of Scientology. I had read Dianetics and I thought, well, maybe this is the answer. Maybe this is how I can like, be more sane and happy and healthy. And I tried all this, and we didn't get completely sucked in. We just did a couple of auditing courses, and then it didn't have the advertised effect. It didn't work. So I was like, okay, next. I shuffled that off and I went on to something else. And I ended up buying a business, and as a small business owner, the terror just sucked me in even more, and I was like, oh God, I need some sort of guidance. So I got sucked into law of attraction and hustle culture, and then that kind of put me into a whole bunch of pseudoscience stuff. And I was just kind of trying everything, trying desperately to find something that would give me a sense of control over my life, my mind, my health, the world, my money. I just needed something that made me feel like I had some control. But after an embarrassingly long time of that, I finally, it finally kind of sunk in that none of this stuff was actually really working. I mean, it's hard because some of it works like a little, like there's a little bit, you get a little bit of help. And it sort of seems like it's going to work. And then everyone's running around going, oh, this definitely, definitely, definitely works. And so you kind of convince yourself for a while, but eventually I got it through my thick head that this was all confirmation bias. It was just a bunch of bullshit that people made up and, convince themselves. There's a lot of motivated reasoning going on. So I finally figured that out. But I still felt a little lost, like, but I'm in this small rural town and everybody thinks you have to be religious, and is there something wrong with me? Why can't I have this faith thing that everyone says is so important? And then I discovered atheist YouTube, and I was like, oh, I'm not the only one. It's okay. It's okay to just not believe. Lots of people are merely living their lives as atheists, and it's like they haven't been hit by lightning. The world hasn't come crashing down around their ears. It's fine. This is where I belong. I'm home now. End of story. So it wasn't really, traumatic. I didn't have a lot of, big problems, but it did. Again, it's kind of embarrassing that it took me so long to trust my own critical thinking skills, because now I'm like, duh, like I should have seen that a long time ago. I did. I saw it when I was 7 years old. I saw it again when I was 15, but there's just all this pressure to try to make it be something that it isn't. And that's how I ended up where I am.
Well, I love that you shared that too, because I also sometimes have felt a similar way, like, wow, wow, I had all those questions when I was like 5 years old, and then why did I continue in this as long as I did? But I mean, you're right. The pressure is pretty strong not to veer away from that. And in some cases, the fear and guilt and shame as well. But I'm glad you made it here.
Yeah, I am real happy to be here.
Yeah.
And, I feel like I was willing to put so much effort. I think a lot of people share this feeling. I was willing to put so much effort into just really learning whatever it is that they were wanting to teach me. Like I tried for a while to wrap my head around how quantum mechanics has something to do with your like emotional tone vibration. Like, and it just, like I was willing to try really hard and like give it the whole like 100%. And now I can put that energy into things that are actually going to work instead of toward things that are just, made up. So
Yeah.
If I could go back and for the 13 years I was in doing paganism, if I can take all that time pad doing like spell work, thinking it was going to work and not,
Mhm.
cringe. And now I'm cringing.
Mhm.
Yay.
It's
Oh, I
okay.
see a question. Someone has asked how long from leaving CS to being an atheist? How many years? Okay, well, it the last didn't really believe in Christian Science during my teen years, but I went to church because my mother insisted, and I would just try to find ways out to get out of it, But I didn't go to church again voluntarily until I had my own kids. And then we took them because we were just trying to do the right thing. But to being full atheist, to saying, no, I definitely don't believe in any supernatural things at all, honestly, I was probably in my 30s, maybe no 40s. No, because I did the whole law attraction thing when I was in my 40s. So 45. So sorry if you were hoping for it to be a shorter answer than that, but I think it's faster now. Like if you know that you want to get to recover from what you've been through, we're here to help you, and it doesn't have to take that long for you.
Mhm.
It took that long for me because I was by myself, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. I bet we'll talk a little more about that in a minute when we talk about why we all enjoy volunteering here. But yeah, thank you for that, Rachel. That was great. Let's see. David, you're up next. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Oh boy. So so I grew up. The expectation, from what I heard, I think it was Rachel mentioned. It's just like, well, of course. Um, and like, what do you mean? Like, you don't have a choice. The whole idea of having a choice is foolish. And often go to church. Grew up, Baptist, Protestant, um, and went to. I think I was 15 and went through Ken Ham's Answers in Genesis program. So very much into creationism, young Earth issues. I remember coming across a National Geographic once, and they were mentioning plate tectonics, and my mother going, "Well, you need to be careful about that stuff." Admittedly, like Rob said, memory is a notoriously difficult thing to pin down. So there are sometimes with some of these stories, I'm like, how often have I told these things to myself that they've become my own personal mythology? But it's a fun story, so I'll run with it. Kind of like mythology being fun stories. But went. I was going to be a pastor. Felt the calling. I converted. Initially, gave Jesus. And put him in my right ventricle. And when I was around, I think 16 or so, 15, I remember, writing, a letter to my mother, like, I want to do this. How do I do it? For all I know, she still has that letter, many, many years ago. And so, did the whole prayer thing, went through the, whole questions, and just felt the calling was going to go. And initially, I was going to go to Moody Bible Institute, which man, life would have been different had I been accepted in there. Ended up going to Grace Bible College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's now called Grace Christian University. They've grown quite a bit. When I was there, they had less than 200 students total. It was small. They used to refer to it as Grace Bridal College because despite the fact that only 200 students were there, at least a dozen people would get, dozens. So you mean like 24? Like you'd have a dozen marriages coming out of this almost every year. It was insane. Um, and yeah, Bart Ehrman says hi. Yeah, so but about it, I fell in with a critical thinking group at the time. There was, in fact, in prep for this, I was going through. I still have my study Bible, King James only, of course, from the time, and I came across there's these tracks, and this has an image of Satan throwing flaming arrows at the King James Bible with all the other versions on the arrows. So at the time, I fell into King James onlyism, fell into the far right of the right on theological circles, mid-ex dispensationalism. So most people aren't going to know what any of that really means. So for those in the crowd that do, represent. Lots of fun there. And in fact, so this anybody who remembers tracks, like just so much fun. These things were, in fact, Grand Rapids. There was a time I almost got involved with one of the printing presses for it may have been actually Dial the Truth or something like that. This was in Alabama, but it was actually a full on printing press. They would just print these things out. Almost got involved. It's just hilarious. And so, but there's one around how was it? Isaiah 14:12, King James reads, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning." Now, but in the other version says, "How have you fallen from heaven, O morning star?" Then it references the fact that in Revelation 22:16, the morning star is Lord Jesus Christ. So therefore, it's blasphemy in all of these other versions. And I love, and here's the joy of tracks. Is there any doubt who is the daddy of these new versions? Oh my God, I love it. It's absolutely fabulous. So it's had a lot of fun. It was very much, I took pride in the fact of being basically a pain in the ass to anybody else. I was a jerk, frankly. Loved being conservative to the conservative. Focus on the family wasn't nearly strong enough. It was, but fell in with a crowd where we were like, okay, we're going to study philosophy. And, I'd gone in to studying, of course, everybody starts with C.S. Lewis. Calling him a philosopher is a bit of a misnomer. But fell in with presuppositional philosophy, Carl F. H. Henry, being one, and just having a lot of fun with this. And, along the path, started going, okay, some of this stuff isn't quite working. And started studying science a bit more. Wait, Genesis doesn't quite work. Okay. And yeah, I'm trying to imagine me being worse than folks in the family. Oh my God, yeah, bad. It was nasty. And it was actually removed from, asked to leave a couple of churches and some youth groups because I was so vehement. It was ridiculous. And some of the ideas that I had around it. And so, Genesis doesn't working, but of course that's a slippery slope. So, if the literal interpretation doesn't work, well, then now what? So delved into Catholicism a little bit. Shout out to Rob. And found that it actually did answer quite a few questions, but then didn't answer other ones and only created more. Like, well, dang it. So, it had started all sorts of, there were about 6 of us or so. And we had a philosophy study group every week. And we've been doing this for months. And then 9/11 happened. And at that moment, I had started reading George H. Smith's Atheism, the Case Against God. Still probably one of the best books out there for those who are more philosophically minded. Some things are a little, okay, doesn't work as well anymore, but still overall really excellent. And it was November. So it was like 9/11 happens in September. I had been reading the book, started applying. Well, wait a minute. I know Islam must be wrong. Wait, all the same arguments against Islam can be worked against Christianity. Damn. And so November of 2001, I remember, just being in the middle of the group, and we're all like, I'm asking a few questions, and people are looking at me a little weird in this little philosophy study group. And then finally I just went, yeah, nope, not a believer anymore. And they're like, and of course we're on campus at Bible college. So like you can be removed as a student. And so from then on, basically played a skeptic. I found out later that the professors were not stupid. And they really weren't. I had some excellent teachers at the time. True legit scholars. And they were not fooled. They pretty much knew that I had left. And in fact, one professor is still there. He, in my final semester, had set up like a couple of independent studies. It took a ridiculous number of credit hours to finish up. And in one of them, it was a full-on research essay into open theism, which, for those who want to know, we can talk about that one later. But just as a final, like, maybe can bring him back in, kind of thing, like go as far as that. And no, it didn't work. So and since then, it was great actually, Rachel, hearing about Christian Science. Got into religious science, which it's also New Thought. It was an offshoot from the Mary Baker Eddy group. There's like 60s, 70s, they come out and they come away from them. Their big thing was like, no, medicine does work. Yes, you can pray, but still take your Advil, kind of thing. Like that was their like, joke, funny, like, we're not quite that crazy. And turns out they just are, but just in a different way. And so, but it was really pleasant because you really wanted to go after the community. Because, that has come up quite a bit, not only in, talks we've had here, but also in comments. It's like, what do you do after this? Like literally every part of who you are is bound up in this. And what are you going to do? How do you connect to people? And so definitely when searching for that, since then, I've just gotten used to not having a whole lot of friends, and I'm okay with that. And so, it's studied, Buddhism, got into that a little bit. And now, at this point, I'm a firm believer in Mark Manson's, I have very few fucks to give. So, what am I going to do about it?
I love that.
Yeah.
Well,
ultimately, I love people, and yeah, there it is.
We're your friends. You have lots of friends here, David.
Yeah.
Speak for yourself, Kara.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
I mean, really.
That's fair. Yeah.
No, David, you're my friend, and I love when you're here, and I love you and Rob's silly competition, and it makes me happy.
It is fun.
Oh yeah, we got to figure out how this one counts towards the tally for both of y'all. Do we need to like calculate how much
Does it
speaking
like
time?
cancel each other out?
I don't know.
That? I mean, I don't. No.
We might have to do a poll in the hangout.
I'll do a poll
see.
question. Does this cancel each other out, or does it count that there are 2 separate talks for each other?
Who's your favorite guest? No, we love you both. Yes.
Yeah, please, yeah.
We won't turn
So
people against you that way. I love it. Well, yeah, we have
Everybody has to
definitely.
answer to that one. Dr. Delray is our favorite guest here. That's all.
That's a
there,
good
yeah,
point.
there it
Yes.
is. Yeah,
Yes, Darrel
yeah.
is our favorite guest on his show. But we have definitely benefited from both Rob and David's contributions, which have been fantastic over the
For
years that
sure.
we've been doing this. All right. Well, let's go on. We have two more people that we still want to hear from, Emily and Eric. Emily, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Emily, and like what Kara mentioned earlier, I grew up Mormon, and so in Mormonism, there are definitely a lot of common themes as to why people deconstruct. A lot of them I've noticed online. A lot of like the sketchy things Joseph Smith has done. That's a pretty common one. Polygamy doctrine. Really recent trouble with the law regarding excess tithing funds and also sexual abuse, similar to that of Jehovah's Witnesses or Catholics. Those are very common reasons why people will leave. And while all those are definitely reasons I left too, the first thing that kind of like started my deconstruction, I would have to say, would be the sexism. In Mormonism, 12-year-old boys are kind of like way higher than any woman in the church. And like, no matter how worthy of a woman you are, like you will never have the priesthood. And in order to have like any leadership role beyond being basically like a children's pastor or being over other women, you would need the priesthood. So women, like they can't even be a clerk, like they couldn't look over the finances at all. Really the most they could do would be, I don't know, like to talk in church, I guess. And that really bothered me when I was a kid because I was like, that's really not fair. Like no matter what I do, like I can't be equal to the boys. And I remember being like, maybe when I was in elementary school, I really wanted to be a bishop when I grew up. And I thought that would be really fun. And, I couldn't be a bishop because I'm not a boy. And, that's kind of like the prerequisite to being a bishop, right? Um, so yeah, the sexism was definitely the most bothersome thing for me, and that kind of persisted on. So after I realized Mormonism wasn't for me, I did try the Community of Christ for a little bit. They're kind of like the more progressive sect of Mormonism, more or less. Unfortunately, that sect of Mormonism is pretty much dying out, which is kind of unfortunate that like the better of the two is dying out, whereas the more harmful sect of Mormonism is the one that's thriving. Um, but yeah, I tried the Community of Christ a little bit. They're more progressive in the sense that women can have leadership roles, so that kind of solved, one thing I was looking for, and also queer people can get married in the temple. They also don't believe in a lot of the harmful doctrines that Joseph Smith started. Like they never believed in the polygamy doctrine. That's not something for them. However, despite loving like what this church stands for, ultimately, I didn't really feel like this was for me either because I just wasn't really sure if I believed in God. And that's kind of like the keystone to Christianity a lot is even though it's a really progressive and positive community, if you don't believe in Jesus or God, it's kind of hard to like feel like you belong in it, right? So around the time I was in high school, something kind of funny is I saw this photo. I think it was in like a Facebook group or something like that. And I don't remember the caption, but it was something like things I remember from my childhood or something like that. And it was pictures of some things in a Mormon church. Like there was like a floral couch, there was like the certain carpet that they used. And one of the hashtags was ex-Mormon. And at the time, like I didn't know ex-Mormon was a thing. And I was like, oh my goodness, I feel kind of seen. And so, kind of like what Rachel mentioned earlier, I looked into um, atheism in YouTube. And from there, I found out about RfR through Hemat Mehta on one of his videos. And then I ended up contacting the helpline. So yeah, and since then, I got involved with the online community, and then I started volunteering about a year later, and I've loved being a part of RfR ever since, and it's gotten me plugged into a lot of secular communities, and I definitely feel way more appreciated in those communities than I ever did in Mormonism. So yeah.
Wow. Well, we are glad that you're here and that you found us. And oh man, can totally relate to that feeling of, wow, okay, if I'm going to be below the 12-year-old boys forever. This is not an arrangement I am okay with. Wow, that is so
Yeah.
insulting. I'm sorry that people told you that. Yikes. Well, we're glad that you're here, and it was super fun getting to hang out with y'all at the excursion. Also, just wanted to mention that again.
Oh, definitely.
And Eric, do you want to tell us about your story too? Obviously, for people that don't know, Emily and Eric are in the same place together. A little bit of an item. Welcome. I love that. Oh, y'all are so cute.
Ah, gross.
Ew, PDA, leave room for Jesus.
Throw it in my mouth.
Just kidding. No,
We
go
kicked
ahead,
Jesus out.
Eric.
He didn't pay his rent.
Yeah. I love it. Jesus got
Romance is
evicted.
dead.
Yeah, so like my sweetheart here, I was also raised Mormon, and uh, one of the things that was really hard for me is growing up in Mormonism, especially after I started, being a teenager, was I experienced something that actually Dr. Ray describes in some of his talks and also his book, Sex and God, uh, which is it's sort of a guilt cycle, uh, and specifically surrounding, for me, the most severe source of guilt was surrounding sexuality and sexual feelings, especially the ones that are just strong around puberty. And uh, the bizarre thing is I'm actually one of those rare people that had enough willpower to not masturbate and not have sex, but Mormonism, they believe in this thing called thought crime. And so, despite supposedly doing the right thing, even thinking about sex was enough to make me feel just as guilty as the people who actually were masturbating and having sex. And so that was enough. And I mean, I even remember specifically some days in my thoughts telling myself, "You're a monster." I i hated myself just for even thinking about sex. And even I remember sometimes I would have a dream about sex and wake up the next morning thinking it was my fault and feeling horrible about myself pretty much every day. And the reason why that gets into the guilt cycle is because, this was really convenient for the religion, because I had to compensate for the guilt I was feeling, which compelled me to pray more and read my scriptures more, and then of course give 10% of my minimum wage to the church, and uh, help the church maintain and grow, and which led me into becoming a missionary when I was 19, where I worked, probably 13 hours a day without any pay, trying to uh, save souls into the correct version of Christianity. Uh, and I'd say it was really on my mission when I, for the first time, really, really started to doubt, because it's one thing when you're just growing up in the church, but then when you actually have to try to convince others and then they come back with their counterpoints and questions, then that can get you to question more. But it was actually a significant event when I really, really started to question, because uh, for those of you who don't know, Mormon missionaries travel in pairs, and so I was with my what we called companion, and we got a phone call one day from a member of the local Mormon church, and he said his father passed away from some illness that doctors weren't able to treat. And he wanted us to bring his dad back to life because we were missionaries, and because of our special position in the church, he thought that God would listen to our prayers more than his, I suppose. And so we went to the hospital. It was the first time I had ever seen a dead body. And uh, Mormons do this thing where they do a special blessing where they put their hands on someone's head and they say, they regurgitate a quoted prayer. And we did that, and spoiler alert, nothing happened. He's still dead. And the significant thing about that was, not just the trauma of it all, like that was one thing, but what led to me doubting was I felt a high amount of confidence that we really were going to be able to perform a miracle that day and resurrect that person, to use biblical terminology. And I felt that the Holy Spirit was confirming to me that we were going to be able to do that. And the reason why that's significant is because Mormon doctrine is that the the way you believe things is not because of evidence or proof, of course, but it's because the Holy Spirit confirms to you that something is true, like the Book of Mormon is true, or that the Mormon Church is true, or that Joseph Smith was a legit prophet, those sorts of things. Like, you get confirmation of that because of a religious experience that you have with the Holy Spirit. And I thought that the Holy Spirit was telling me that we were going to be able to perform this miracle that we were requested to perform, and it didn't work, and the big issue with that is all of these other things that the Holy Spirit supposedly confirms are not falsifiable. I made the mistake of thinking the Holy Spirit was confirming something that was falsifiable, and then it was falsified right before my eyes. And that led me down this path of thinking, well, if the Holy Spirit was clearly wrong about that, how do I know it wasn't wrong about all those other things that it supposedly was confirming to me? And that was an itch I just could not scratch. And one thing led to another. I had to, you know, unsurprisingly, I experienced some severe mental health issues. I had to be sent home early from the mission. Mormon missionaries usually do it for 2 years. I only lasted 5 months. And after I went home, after several months of suffering, I finally found relief in letting the belief go. And the less I believed in the nonsense that I was indoctrinated, the more relief I experienced. And after going to college, I discovered atheist YouTube, like what Rachel mentioned, and also humanism. And I've come to believe that that there are things out there that we can't explain, and who knows what the entirety of the truth is, or what comes after death, or any of those big questions that people make up answers for. What we do know is that we are here and we have each other, and what really works in solving our problems is when we work together and show compassion to each other. And I find at this point humanism to be a lot more attractive and a lot more healthy, and I can never go back.
Wow, Eric, that is a really powerful story. I did not know all that. I feel like I've known all of y'all, some of you, for years, and I did not know all of these things that you're sharing with us. That's incredible. And I'm sorry you went through that. That sounds incredible. incredibly intense. I'm
It
so glad you made it
was.
through.
It was. And like I said in my bio, like I unfortunately just probably just out of mere chance of internet algorithms was not exposed to recovering from religion, uh, even though it existed at the time that I was going through that. Uh, but when I finally did discover it, I was like, wow, that would have been nice to know about that at the time. I and it was at a time of my life where I had kind of figured out myself mostly and was wanting to give something back. And when I found out about recovering from religion, I was like, yes, this is how I can give something back.
Yeah, well, we definitely
Mhm.
appreciate you doing that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what you do to give back later, but you have definitely done a lot. So we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to go to another question next to put to everybody. This one's a little bit of a short answer question. After you've all shared these really interesting and very, very different stories for each of you, these journeys that you went on, I'm wondering if you could share what's something that you felt like you needed to recover from, and what's something that helped you recover after your journey, if there was something. And let's go back to Rob.
Well, regarding what helped me recover from religion, I'm not really sure how to answer that because I think I was one of the lucky few who was able to do it without a lot of help. One bit of thing that I didn't mention before that did help is I said I had two siblings. One was much younger when I was going through this, still a baby basically, but one was only 2 years younger than me. My sister's 2 years younger than me, and we were of the same mindset about the rest of the family becoming evangelical crazies. So I'm sure that helped because we talked. Um, I don't know if she had gone over or how that would have affected me, or if I had gone over how it would have affected her. But we were both of the same mindset in that regard, so I'm sure that helped. Um, I'm also amazed because everyone else mentioned finding YouTube and whatever that I was able to deconvert without the internet. There was no such thing as the internet. Wasn't even in anyone's mind at the point, except maybe the military establishment, which had created it. But it certainly wasn't a public thing that was even going to come as a thing. There was no way to watch videos except for live projections on television. At the time, you couldn't even record anything on television. It was before videotape. So, you couldn't go get a video anywhere. There was no podcast. And there was no recovering from religion or anything like that. Even if I found a phone I could have called, there was nothing that I was aware of like that. So I was definitely quite fortunate. Being a helpline agent and hearing all of the stories where people are not quite as lucky as me, including the stories of the other guests tonight, make me realize my good fortune all the more. And I feel good being able to help people on their much more difficult path to recovery. So that's one of the things I like about volunteering here.
Rob, that was wonderful to hear. And I didn't have RfR when I was going through my process either. It was basically, I did have YouTube and skepticism that opened me up to a water
You
idea
youngins with
in
the internet
college.
thing and
Yeah.
YouTube.
YouTube's on the YouTubes with Utes. Anyway, Rachel, did you want to respond to that question?
Yeah, although I'm afraid I don't have much to add beyond what Rob said. I also was not really traumatized by my religious experience. It was not, I mean, I had other trauma from other things that happened in my life, but I didn't have many, the kind of struggles that a lot of our clients have. And again, like Rob said, I feel really fortunate that it was a lot easier for me. I didn't have that lingering fear of hell. I didn't have all the guilt, the shame, like all the trauma that a lot of our clients have. So for me, the transition was much easier. And so I think sometimes when people don't have trauma, they have a little survivor's guilt, and they think, oh, maybe I don't have anything to contribute because I haven't been through that. But I think it's just the opposite. Those of us that don't have that kind of damage don't, we're just a little ahead of the game. We can help because we're healthier at this moment, and we can be the one to give care to people who need it. And soon those of you who were more traumatized will be better, and then you'll be able to give help too. But like those of us that are not currently suffering get to help those of you who are.
Yeah,
Well
that's a
said.
really good point. Yeah, and I know we've talked about that too. We
Hmm.
even have volunteers and a lot of clients, or maybe not clients, but attendees to the RfRx shows that were never religious, but they're still here to help kind of give back and build the community and be able to help, because they're in a position to do so. And I think that's great that people are able to do that.
Yeah, I did want to add one other thing that I was thinking of when Rob was talking, and the idea of having somebody to talk to is so huge. That's something that I didn't even realize how important it was until I came to RfR and I started learning from, those of you that like David and Darrel and people who have the experience and the knowledge to tell us like what does the human person need to be psychologically healthy, and having connections, having people to listen to, people who agree with you, people who support you, people who care about you and really want what's best for you instead of trying to, manipulate you to fit their agenda. That's incredibly powerful, which is why RfR is so helpful. And so, the fact that Rob had, a sibling to talk to, the fact that my husband was also, had deconverted from Catholicism and he was, very supportive, that made it a lot easier for me.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Okay, well, let's keep going. We are moving right along here. We're getting a little short on time, but I want to be able to hear from everybody on this and then our next question. So, David, what about you? Was there some recovery that you had to do and anything that helped you?
Oh, yeah. um, it's difficult at the time. The trauma language hadn't ascended as a way that people talk about those things as much. So it was just a matter of like, so your life is over. What are you going to do about it? And the I will say that looking back, without the group, things could have gotten really dark. I mean, within the course of like 3 months, at least four more of us had deconverted, and continued to not only attend the college, but then continue to be friends and kind of work through philosophy and kind of try to figure stuff out. Um, and that was super helpful, which is really what it ended up pursuing going forward. It switched over from pastoral training to just flat out psych, which then of course led to being a therapist and everything associated with that. But I will say one thing, and I've talked about this before in one of the presentations, is that one of the things that it finally really dawned on me, it's for everybody, is that the question we often ask when going through it, even as professional summaries, we'll ask clients this, and I think that it actually does people a disservice. Is that, well, now this is over. Now you have to find a new way of being, and it finally dawned on me that's the trap. Like that is buying into the bullshit of the fundamentalist ideology that we came out of. That this is this supernatural, all-encompassing, platform that now you have to totally create something new. Well, the reality is, it was never based on anything but our own human capacity for meaning and purpose making. Like it never existed. Like that. So we don't have to create something new. We were already in the process. Like this hasn't changed. We always were. We just happen to be over here, and now we're kind of shifting along. But some of the answers, so-called, obviously little a, not necessarily big A, but it's like the little a answers still may be true. I mean, there are still aspects of, now granted, more liberal, versions of Christianity, but there were still answers within that they still adhere to, as far as like, yeah, no, that was a legit way of like focusing on things. I mean, community, family, the idea of having ethics, of having a principled way of living, those were all part of the faith. Just because they don't happen to coincide with all of the details anymore doesn't mean that we're going to throw out all of it. And so it's one of the things I work with a lot of a lot of clients on with this is to recognize that you haven't changed your path of meaning making. You've simply encountered some rocks along the way, and all of a sudden you're maybe at a different elevation, and oops, now you have to start looking for water because you're getting dehydrated. I mean, it's just like you're going through the struggle, but it's not that you have to remove yourself and jettison your entire life. That is exactly the opposite. That's buying into that somehow you were awful, and you have to reject everything that came before. No, you really don't. Your humanity didn't change, thankfully. It's still there. Now it's just about embracing it.
I love that.
Mhm.
That's a really great point. Thank you for that.
I'll be at my TED Talk. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. Stick around for the hangout to learn more. It's awesome. Well,
And it's way
let's
cheaper than a TED Talk.
That's true. That's true. Well, let's see. Let's keep going. Emily, how about you? Did you have anything that you felt like you needed to recover from or that particularly helped you recovering?
Yeah, I think the thing that was most helpful would probably be recovering from religion and contacting the helpline. That was such a great resource. And when I contacted them, they got to plug me into a lot of great other resources, such as like ex-Mormon Facebook groups. They showed me some pretty cool YouTube videos that I hadn't seen before. And also like the ex-Mormon Reddit page was really helpful too. So really like a lot of, I guess, social media was really helpful for me. And then also getting plugged into like-minded people. So like my in-person American Atheist group has been really helpful. And also Secular Student Alliance, and going to like some of their national events was really great. Unfortunately, there wasn't a chapter near me because it was defunct, but they do have some national events and those were a lot of fun to go to. So, and just being around like-minded people, I think can be one of the most helpful things ever. So,
Oh, completely agree. Yeah, and thanks for the shout out for RfRx. I agree with you.
yeah.
And yeah, yeah, that's what we're here for is to help people recover. So I am so glad you found RFR and that it was helpful. And Eric, what about you?
So, like I said earlier, I wasn't aware of RFR's existence while I was recovering, and so uh, there were a number of things that I still was able to do, primarily on my own. Therapy was one of them. I was fortunate enough to have access to that, albeit my initial therapist was a Mormon therapist, so that may have maybe dragged things along a little bit longer. Uh, but another thing that comes to mind is actually humor. Uh, so I uh, I did discover particular YouTube channels that uh, were critical of religion and also educational, but also funny. Like there's the very first YouTube video of what I would call atheist humanist YouTube was a YouTube channel called Dark Matter something. And
2525.
yeah, that's the one. Yeah, thanks, Rob. And it was an animated uh, video of what would have happened if Adam and Eve didn't eat the fruit, and you can imagine how hilarity would ensue. And I realized that when you laugh about something that I was indoctrinated to believe to be a big deal and blasphemous if you question it. When I laughed at it, this big thing in my mind just started to shrink down. And the more I laughed, the more it shrank. And it just took all of its power and influence away. And until it just eventually didn't bother me anymore. I don't believe it, not afraid of it. And now I can focus my energies on being a good person and being a happy person.
I love that. I love that you
Mhm.
brought up humor. That resonates with me a lot. I like to laugh. And I feel like we spend a lot of time thinking about how awful it was and these things were so bad and this has damaged me, but like, let's also have joy in our lives. I love that. Thank you. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, let's see. We are getting close to the
Good.
end of our time here, but we have not even asked y'all yet to tell us about what it is that you do now that you volunteer for RFR. And I think we need to talk about that. So we'll try to go kind of quickly, but I want to hear from all of you, and I know our guests do too, about all of the different really cool things that people do when they volunteer at RFR. So Rob, what do you do at RfR, and what do you find rewarding about volunteering?
Well, so I thought about this in advance what I was going to say, and I wrote a whole bunch of stuff, and I just edited out 3 paragraphs because I know we're running late. So I'll try to be quick. Like most volunteers, I think I started as a helpline agent, and I retired from my aerospace career at the beginning of the pandemic and had some extra time. Some of that I filled by doing some other things I work on, but I realized, oh, I've heard of Recovering from Religion on this show called The Atheist Experience, and maybe Talk Heathen. So I decided that would be a good way to spend some of my time. Um, you know, well, I had always thought that if I had time on my hands, I would do that. And I was like, well, why would I care? Because I didn't have a lot of trauma. But probably comes from having to deal with my extended family for decades and decades and decades who are unreachable, are always trying to convince me that they're right. And, I can't help them see their way out of their problems that they've created because of their in this mindset. So people call the ACA shows and they want help. And then I heard about Recovering from Religion. So I can be of help. So I Googled RfR, I found the website, I applied to be a volunteer. And after my interview by none other than Anthony Magnabosco, and after training, I started working as a helpline agent. I take calls almost exclusively. I like that better than chat. And as was mentioned earlier, I had a lot of other roles. I interviewed prospective volunteers. I helped to train other helpline agents. I helped with the newly created at the time weekly hangouts for the online community. And then I started working on RfRx with you guys, and that has been fantastic. I really love that. These days, I've given up some of my earlier RfR roles and concentrate on working the helplines and supporting the RfRx meetings, and occasionally representing the organization as an ambassador.
And we love having you on RfRx. I'm glad we stole you away from your other roles. And
Thank you.
Mhm.
also, Rob trained me as a helpline agent.
And Helen.
Yep. Rob trained
That's
me too.
right.
So
Rob is a prolific volunteer. I think
and
it's just volunteer.
Anthony also did my entrance interview as well for RFR. So
Did you confront him and say, "Hey, I know your voice. Are you Anthony Magnavazzo?" Because I did that.
Of course you did.
I had heard him for hundreds of hours. I listened to watch all of his videos. He goes,
the thing
"I
is
don't
though, I
have
didn't
time to
find
talk
out
about that now. I have 20 minutes to interview you."
I didn't find out who Anthony was till after I started volunteering, and I was like, "Holy shit!" So I had one of those moments. So
He told me he was going to have to get one of those technology things that you put on the phone that changes your voice, so no one else would recognize it.
That's great.
so awesome. So Rachel, what do you do here at Recovering from Religion?
Oh, I'm
Or
like
what do you not do?
I know. I kind of just got into it. I got really excited and started doing a lot of stuff. I started out as a helpline agent and I thought that was great. I loved it. I was not interviewed by Anthony Magnabosco and I was not trained by Rob. There are other interviewers and there are other trainers. But I really liked it. And then I was invited pretty early on, like a lot of people are, to modify or moderate the OC, which I do. And I got excited and I created a whole um channel I call self-help channel that is a kind of a it's a study group because I'm not a professional, but it's a study group. I found a book written for self-help on the acceptance and commitment therapy. And I just created a series of daily lesson posts so that we all sort of study it together. And it's been going for a couple of years, and people just join in when they join in, and they just continue on through the lessons. And I support them and answer questions. And so, yeah, I'm super excited about ACT. I love it. But I do that. And then also I started with Helen, co-hosting a support group. One of the virtual support groups. When they did those, Helen and I were the first helpline agents they pulled over to the support group side. And that was when they were really separated. And so I didn't know anything really about the support groups. And so we did that for a while. And then I became an ambassador, and that was really fun. I got to do some interviews. And then they asked me to run the support group program. And I was like, you guys remember Eric Wells? He used to run RfRx and he ran the support group program. Unbelievable. I don't know how he did it. He's like some sort of like alien mutant person that could do that much work. I don't know how he did it.
No
I
idea.
have to
It
have
shouldn't
5
be
people.
possible.
It's crazy. I have to have a huge team like Kara. I have to have a huge team in the support group program, running it all for me, because there's no way I could do all the work that Eric did. But anyway, that's awesome. I have a great team. And then a year after I became support group director, somebody dropped out of the board, and I was invited to join the RfR board of directors. So now I'm the baby board member. I'm the youngest. Am I the youngest? I don't know if I'm the youngest, but I am the newest member of the RfR board, and I've been on the board for almost a year. So that's all the things that I do. If you volunteer, you don't have to do that much. Really, it can be as little as 4 hours a month. It really can.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, you don't have to do all these things. These are like full-time jobs that some of y'all are describing, but you don't have to do all that. But we so appreciate y'all doing all of that too. Well, okay, David, how about you?
So I know I stumbled across RfR when looking for secular therapists or something. I forget exactly how that worked out, but filled it out and became part of the STP, Secular Therapy Project. And then was it you, Kara, who
Probably.
initially asked if hey, mind doing a presentation on, is it like the RfRx was just kind of like you because at the time, it was a couple of years ago, you weren't doing every week.
Yes, I
That
was
evolved.
co-hosting when
Yeah.
Eric Wells was still in charge of it,
Yeah,
and
you
I
were.
think
Yeah.
I remember the first episode. I don't remember if this was your first episode, but it was the first episode I co-hosted with you, where for some reason we started talking about boats, and we went off on a tangent doing
Just
boat puns in the
complete
chat.
tangent. Yes, everything was boat puns.
Memories.
Yeah.
That was so
And
much fun.
yeah, I had so much fun with it. I'm like, well, let's do it another 19 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that just kind of kept going. And then it was every so often, I think it was Eric sent me a list, and then he sent me so we've got all these topics. What would you mind talking with? I'm like, sure. I'm just kind of do some research projects. I'll just nerd out on all these things. Just
Yes.
started having some fun with it. So,
And
but
you
yeah,
have become our most prolific RfRx presenter.
I
I think you've done more than
wondering when
Darrel,
I'm
and this
not
is
going
his
to be asked
baby.
out.
Yeah. Well, we love it, and we want you to keep coming back, and
Yeah.
Rob too. Outstanding. All right, well, let's go on. Emily, tell us a little bit about what you do here.
Yeah, like Rachel and Rob said, I also started out as a helpline agent. Yeah, it was really nice because I didn't really live super close to a big city. At the time I didn't have a car, so I couldn't really have a support group going on at that time. So yeah, I started out at doing that, and then I became a support group leader when I ended up moving to Lexington, Kentucky, because it was a lot closer. And I've had my support group for about a year now. And then I've also been an ambassador before. So far, I've tabled at 2 events at Secular Student Alliance Conference, and I was actually with Dr. Ray. That was awesome. And then I also got to table at a Halloween 5K near me, and that was pretty fun too. So, and then I'm hoping to table next year at the next Secular Student Alliance conference. I just submitted like an application to ambassador at that event. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. And then I've also sometimes helped out with the tech support channel. So kind of helping people out just with things like helping them with their recovering from religion email if they have one, or if they need help with like Yodel, so answering the calls we get, just things like that. I try to drop in and help out as needed. So
Yes, thank you. And I love that. That's so important too for anybody that's wondering. Our RfR ambassadors are people that go out and represent RfR at events to the public and help spread the word that we have services that people can benefit from. So thank you for doing that. And Eric, you have a pretty big job here as well. What do you do for RfR?
Well, I started out as a helpline agent, as many of us do. I remember hearing the helpline being described on one of the Atheist Community of Austin shows, and it sounded really interesting to me. I was really interested in talking to people one on one, and it just was a journey from there. I must have done something right, because the helpline director at the time said, "Hey, Eric, you and a couple of others helpline agents seem to be doing pretty well. Would you like to help me train others?" Because it used to be just there was the helpline director and all of the helpline agents, and not really anything in between. And when Todd Yoder, the initial helpline director, had to step down, I was willing to actually take on that role as helpline director. But I was actually in college at the time and was going to school and had a part-time job. And so I needed some help. I wasn't able to do everything that he did. Todd was incredible. And so I established other roles like the helpline trainer and hero supporter alongside the helpline co-director. And in the meantime, I also was able to participate in the support groups, and I helped Eric Wells establish one of the first virtual chapters, and even was able to take part in one of the Spanish chapters because I learned Spanish as a missionary. And when RfR 3.0 was established, it's now known as the program services team. I had a background in computer science and computer programming, so I started participating in that and ended up being the co-director of that at the same time as being the helpline director. And so I've had to pass on the helpline director role to others since then. Now I pretty much just do IT things, and including web development. And by the way, if any of you listening, if you have experience in JavaScript programming language, web development, relational databases like SQL, and you're willing to contribute a couple of hours a week on average, we could certainly use help with that. It's an interesting perspective. It's very much in the background, not interacting directly with clients, but we're more of volunteers for the volunteers. We support volunteers with the software solutions that we provide, and I've found that to be the role that I feel like I can contribute most, and it's very, very fulfilling. Emily is reminding me that I also monthly co-host our support group together.
yeah, he forgot to put that in.
Like, Eric, thank you for pointing out, because I think people think that like it's just Cara, Rob, myself, David, Darrel, we're very forward facing. Like, we appear on like podcasts and we do this thing every week. And it's nice to hear about people like that do stuff behind the scenes, that you don't have to have your face out there to contribute to recovery from religion, the work that we do. So, thank you for all the work you do, and Emily as well, like the stuff you do that we don't see every day. Like sometimes I forget to think about it. So, much appreciation and much love to you for all the work that you guys do that it's not getting as much recognition as those of us that, have that more forward face out in the community. So, it's deeply appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great point. We're just out here talking. They're back there doing science and things. It's important.
And programming, coding. Fuck that shit.
I love it. Well, we have learned so much about all of y'all, and I cannot wait to continue this conversation, hopefully in the Hangout. But let's go to Q&A for just a couple of minutes. I know we've run a little bit over time, which, come on, we all knew that was going to happen.
happens.
But yeah, let's see if we can get through a couple of questions, and then we'll wrap up and go to our Hangout, and we can continue to chit chat. So, Helen, do you want to start us off with a question for some of our folks here?
Yeah, so we're gonna go to the top. Hey, Rob,
Ooh,
since you had
yes.
no internet to help you deconvert, even though you had as much fear as hell as others, did you ever fear God would punish you for questioning?
Wait,
Were
what
you
was
ever
that?
told that you shouldn't?
Did you say I had as much
Okay.
fear of hell as others?
Not as
yeah,
much.
not as much fear.
Ah, okay. I'm sorry. And then what was what was the end of the question?
Okay, so the first part of this question, there's like 4 in one question. So let me just start with the first one. Did you ever fear God would punish you for questioning?
No, never crossed my mind. I don't know if it's not doctrine of the Catholic Church. I guess the other Catholics could talk about that too later, but it never crossed my mind. I figured he gave me a brain. If I can use it to say this doesn't make sense, then I was right doing that.
All right, so that kind of goes into the other question. Were you ever told you shouldn't be questioning this stuff?
No. Nope, didn't come up.
And
I also didn't get, the good side of not having YouTube is not watching Christian people tell you that yes, you would be punished for questioning stuff. So it was just whatever my priest said, and they didn't say that. Yeah.
so did you have to handle any sort of fear at the time when you're questioning at all?
Not really. As I kind of jokingly mentioned, I didn't like the idea of this supernatural being able to watch every single thing I did. And letting go of that just felt so good. Yeah, no, I'm not
All
being
right,
spied on all the time.
you kind of answered the questions of all the questions. So okay, Kari,
Okay.
let's go on to the next one.
Excellent. Okay, we've got a question for Rachel next. The question is, what was the one thing or moment that solidified for you that what you were doing was just convincing yourself it was real, but it was not actually real? Were you scared when you realized that it wasn't real? And if so, how did you deal with that?
I love this question. I actually can identify the exact instant that it happened because my law of attraction mentor had sent me a book, and I still have it. It was an electronic book. I probably still have it in my phone, that was supposed to be a series of exercises that prove to you that the law of attraction works. And the very first exercise was so blatantly based on confirmation bias that I just sort of, the veil lifted from my eyes, and I was like, oh my God. It's been bullshit this whole time. It's all bullshit. It's been bullshit this whole time, you know? And so I didn't even finish reading the book. I was like, I'm done. It was enough. For some reason, that was just the switch that flipped. I was not scared because I had been scared. What I was scared of, and the reason I was attracted to this stuff to begin with, was I was afraid of making terrible financial decisions. I was afraid of being broke. I was afraid of making catastrophic mistakes in my life. I was afraid of raising my kids wrong, or being a bad person, or being miserable, or I was just afraid of doing life wrong. And so I was attracted to all these things to try to find answers that would tell me what was the right way to live. And when I realized that people were just making it up and nobody knew, I was like, okay, I'm going to screw stuff up. Things are going to go wrong, but it's just normal random, everyday, predictable wrong. It's not because I did law of attraction wrong. It's not because I couldn't figure out how to get my vibration up. It's not because I didn't, say the right words or have the right attitude when I did the thing. It's just the things you do things and they have an effect and then you move on. And to me, that was a huge relief. I wasn't scared, but I also hadn't been indoctrinated with fear of eternal punishment. So if you were, your experience, your mileage may vary because it was different for me probably than it was for you.
That's
As
fair.
I mentioned to the chat when I saw this question asked in the chat, I said this is a bizarre coincidence because I really never heard much about the law of attraction or anything like that until a few weeks ago. My Wikipedia editing group that I've talked about before became aware that there's this thing called lucky girl syndrome, which is like the new permutation of it. And there was nothing about that mentioned on Wikipedia. So I just added last week an entire section on the law of attraction Wikipedia page about lucky girl syndrome. And if anyone, I put the link for the entire page there. It is pretty clear if you had read that, I would think you would know what the whole thing is bullshit, but might have been earlier before Wikipedia. I don't know.
If anybody, Barbara Ehrenreich, she wrote Bright Sided, which is history of basically the affirmative or positive thinking movement in America. Only in America could we come up with this kind of bullshit. But it is a fantastic book, and it goes through just how much of this permeated. You go into the differences between Mary Baker Eddy stuff and New Thought. In fact, when I came across it and read it, when I was actually involved for a while in the religious science group, it was like the defining moment. I'm like, and I'm out. Like, it was just,
Yeah, well,
done.
it wasn't until after the fact that I realized the tie between the whole New Thought movement and how Mary Baker Eddy was actually one of those people. The law of attraction group I was a part of was actually studying Wallace Wattles' The Science of Getting Rich. And it wasn't The Secret, which didn't come out till a little bit later. And then I realized it was just the same stuff being recycled. And obviously, like that all happened during a time in the United States when if you were of a certain demographic, it was really easy to get rich. So it was really easy to convince yourself that it was just because you were special and you had discovered the secrets of the universe, when in fact, you were just at a very particular time in history and you were like, super privileged.
So apparently the phrase the law of attraction has, gotten a little stale and, maybe some bad juju on it. So that's why it keeps changing. Now the whole thing is manifestation.
Because it sounds fancy.
Yeah. And
It's
it
a
sounds
fancy big word.
sciencey in some weird way. Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you. Oh, Eric and Emily, did you want to
Oh, I don't really know too much about it. The funny thing is, Rachel, my mom used to really like to read the Law of Attraction for a time being, but that's all like I remember. She wasn't like very brainwashed into Law of Attraction, but she did dabble into it for like a month or two. But that's all I have to add.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the law of
Okay, I was just
attraction.
making sure because some people dabble into the woo-woo stuff when they leave religion. So, and make sure I covered all the bases.
Was that
Okay.
one of your things, Helen?
Listen, if you want to know about my woo-woo stuff, you can read Rob's interview with me and the Skeptical Inquirer about when I worked at a psychic education center.
Good plug. Good plug.
Yeah, I know.
That's
Look at
great.
me. I'm good at segues.
That was great. And we've got one more question that's for all of the speakers, and then I promise we're going to wrap up and go to the hangout. So, Helen, would you like to put our final question to the speakers?
Yep. So I'm going to toss this to Rob first. For all the speakers, what would you say is the best part of leaving a religion? And what words of affirmation would you like to give people questioning and deconverting from their religion now?
Wow. Okay. Best part of leaving the religion is, the joke is not having to get up on Sunday, but that's true, but it's clearly not wasting the limited lifespan I have on this planet in nonsense and worrying about nonsense and doing nonsense because of other nonsense. Also, as I said, I really didn't have a lot of guilt or fear of stuff, but for most people I do hear from, that's a huge weight off of their minds once they come to the terms with this just being man-made nonsense that they don't have to worry about anymore. And if you can get through that, the fear of what's going to happen to you or friends or family that didn't do exactly the right thing in the afterlife is just vanishes, and life is just so much better.
Nice.
All
All
right.
right. Rachel, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think one of the things that's beautiful about RfR is that we try to meet you where you are. So your specific situation is going to be different from mine or Rob's or David's or Emily's or Eric's. And that's what we can do, is we can talk to you personally and say, what's going on with you? What can we support you with? How can we help you? And just having someone to listen and talk to, but also to direct you to appropriate resources and to make sure that we have, other communities that you can join and other people that you can meet. And that's probably what each individual person needs, is just the individual approach. But if I had to answer just one word, because this is RfR, one word, what do you need in order to recover from religion? Therapy. If you can get good secular therapy, please make that a priority, because that is what's going to make the biggest difference for you.
Seculartherapy.org.
Yes.
All right. And speaking of therapy, David, would you like to comment on this question?
Therapy and community. It's because again, it's that humanity piece. In fact, if you don't find a therapist who is almost immediately celebrating that common humanity, find somebody else. It really, without going into a bunch of my own criticism of modern day therapy, but anyway, so it's just find somebody who just celebrates that, and encourages you to explore, because otherwise it's just, time is freaking limited. But so yeah, no, find people. I could go all over the place, but really, it's finding people that matter, finding people that share the absolute joy of asking questions and just wallowing in uncertainty, not as a sign of something being wrong with you, but as a signal to that answers are never absolute.
All right.
So, Emily, did you want to respond to the question?
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about secular community, it reminds me of Dave Warnock's talk at the Fall Excursion this past year, is he mentioned how a lot of religions warn you about atheism, but in reality, the atheist community is actually really cool and really supportive, and oftentimes a lot better than religious communities. And he like made a joke and he's like, yeah, this is the community that they're trying to hide from you. And so honestly, like, the community is probably my favorite part of secular communities. So do you have a favorite part?
I could come up with a lengthy list of things that I am grateful for after leaving religion. A major thing that comes to mind is uh, being able to be a sexual person without feeling guilt, and even being a little bit of a slut, if I may say so myself, and having that not be a bad word anymore. It's actually an awesome word. It's a compliment now, actually. Like, it doesn't insult me. I'll actually be flattered if you call me that at this point. Uh, Being able to get drunk, and like being allowed to drink alcohol, and just among other things, but just in general, it's having the freedom to having your mind free to base your decisions as an individual or as a society on evidence, and evidence that points to what is healthy and happy, as compared to just arbitrary restrictions based in tradition or stigma, and not anything that evidently leads to a healthy and happy society and individuals.
Excellent. Those are great thoughts. And I can't wait to hear more from all of y'all if you're able to stick around for the hangout, because this has been such an amazing conversation. I'm so glad you were all able to join us and share your experiences and insights with us. And thank you for all of the work that you all do here to support everyone else who's trying to recover from religion. And I am so glad we got to do this, and I cannot wait to continue the conversation. So, without any further ado, I'm sorry we went a few minutes over. We knew it was going to happen, but let's wrap up and move to the hangout, shall we? Okay, so
We should do that.
yes, we should do that. We'll do that now. So don't forget to join us next week. We are back from winter break. This was kind of our bonus hangout episode, but we're back on schedule next week, every Monday again on January 8th. 1 week from now, we're going to have Eugenie C. Scott, the former executive director of the National Center for Science Education, joining us to talk about why we still have to worry about creationists. And then the week after that, we're going to have Brian Keith Dalton, Mr. Deity, God himself, joining us with who knows what revelations. So keep coming back. We're here every week, same time, same channel. We would love to hang out again and continue these conversations. And if you need more RfRx in your life between now and then, don't forget to check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And Helen, where can people find us online?
So, all of you are social media savvy, I hope. So we do have our Facebook main page. This just gives general postings and everything to do with recovering from religion. Also, we have our support group page. So if you're looking for a support group or looking for additional support, like on the Facebook, so you can talk to these are moderated by volunteers, so you can, chit chat on there, but also list when the next support group is coming up. So go do the things on the Facebooks. On the artist formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, these are just postings of things that are coming up with recovering from religion. Same with on the Instagram and also on TikToks. Like Gayle did a TikTok a couple weeks ago, so that's something you should all check out. Look at her being all like up with the Utes on the TikTok. I am going to encourage our wonderful people in our audience and our volunteers to please like, share, subscribe, all the things that we do on social media, because that gets the word out about what we do and connects people with us. Because even if you think like none of my friends will need this, but they might share with someone that does. So please consider when you're fooling around on Instagram and an RfR thing pops up, please share it on your socials if you're able to. You're not going to get weird stuff from your family. Anyway, so moving on, I would like to introduce Darrel Ray again, our founder and president and all around cool person, Dr. Darrel Ray, to give his final thoughts, opinions, criticism, compliments, and such. So, hi, Darrel.
Hey, Helen, thank you. This has been, I thought it'd be fun, but I'm looking forward to this. It's been 10 times funner than I thought, more fun than funner. So it's really I love hearing stories. As Gayle knows, I could listen to stories all day long. And I love it when we get, well, that's why I look at the damn chats almost every day. I try to read all the chats. I don't get them all, but it's because I just love seeing people's stories. But anyway, well, something that occurred to me, and Gayle, you probably noticed this as well. Isn't it amazing how we've matured over the years? I mean, we're 15 years old in April, and we're getting ready to celebrate our 15th birthday, I guess you could say, in April. During our fundraiser that Helen is leading the charge on. But I heard tonight that we have trainers training people who themselves are trained by earlier people. So we're on like the third generation of volunteers that have, started with RfR, trained other people. Those people have trained other people, and those people are now training other people. And you go clear back to Todd Yoder, Eric Wells, Susie Box. There's a whole group of people that aren't with us anymore, but every one of those people still support us. I could call Todd up and ask him for a favor. Eric Wells just chatted in a couple of weeks ago during RfR, and I even went and stayed at his house about a year ago, I guess it was. But anyway, it's just so cool that people come, that people go, but we seem to make friends. And even when people have to go on with their lives in other ways, they still are very supportive. Just fun. Anthony Magnabosco is probably the longest serving volunteer we got. I think Anthony goes back 8 years. I mean, of course, I started it, but beyond me, Anthony, I think he's the longest serving. So it's just pretty cool. Another thing that's hit me is just how many people it takes to run these programs, and how many of you volunteers are doing all sorts of things. And Gayle and I find out about shit you're doing, and we say, well, we didn't know that you did that, or we didn't know we were doing that, or people do shit and they say, let us, how about this? I'll say, well, we didn't even know we needed that. So anyway, we get that a lot from our IT people. They're all the time doing improvements and putting stuff up and things. And I look at it, I don't know what, I have no clue what you're talking about, but thank you for doing it. Eric and Nathan and all the IT people. Anyway, there's one, and as a result of all this, thousands of people are getting help that didn't exist when Rob or I were deconverting. So it's just great that we've got so many people that want to jump in here and make this all happen. There's one thing that also occurred to me is for years I struggled over how can I help my family, because I have religious family members, I got missionary family members, and in starting and working in RfR, it dawns on me, I can't help my family. There's no way I can help them, but I can. So that's the vertical people, my children, my other kinds of nephews and nieces and all. I don't care what I do; they're probably not going to be influenced. But what I can do is help people who aren't my family. They belong to other people's families. So I dropped the idea that I need to help my family. I just dropped it. I still enjoy my family. I interact with them, but I don't even talk about RfR with them, because I can help other people. And that's as good or better than helping my own family. There was some egotistical in me that said I have to help my family, or I have to convert them or deconvert them. You know how that all works. And I think I'm kind of answering one of your questions, Kara. That realization, I don't have to help my family. I can't help my family. It's a waste of my time. I can take that same amount of time and help other people. That was a big aha for me. So you didn't ask me to speak in this, be one of the people talking about their experience, but that's a part of mine. Anyway, I am all finished. Back to you, Helen and Kara.
Thank you, Dr.
Oh, wait.
Okay.
Okay.
One last
Okay.
thing, just to let you all know, we got a big fundraiser coming up in April, so get ready to help us. Helen's going to be putting out all sorts of stuff, so help us get the word out, and hopefully raise a whole bunch of funds. And probably in the next week or two, I'll be making an announcement that'll be kind of cool. I'm not telling anybody yet, though. All right, bye-bye.
I am going to pull Gayle in for a minute, because I want her to talk about why she got involved with RfR. Because since I have both of you here, I'm going to make you do it. So
well,
I'm volunteering you, Gayle.
I've got to be quick on my feet, light on my feet. Oh my goodness. RfR, had I had RfR when I first started my questions, I can't imagine how much less arduous my journey would have been. And it would have started with exactly what we encourage people to start with. I would not have had the courage to talk with an agent. I was from a very religious family and area, and I wasn't ready to admit it to myself, but that resources tab, I would have clicked the hell out of that resources tab, because it's structured in such a way, it's cross-referenced with topics, and whether you can watch a YouTube or read a book or look at a website or listen to a podcast, it's a beautiful thing. So that's sort of entry level. And then I might have worked up the courage to have a conversation with an agent, and then I might have responded if they had invited me into the online community, and I might have participated in conversations, and I might have found it in me to attend a support group if had there been one in my area. All of the things, the growth that RfR has had has been completely organic. Every time we develop a new area or a new program, it's because we're trying to answer the question, how can we help? And honestly, this is Darrel and I's little secret. Most of it doesn't come from us. Most of it comes from our volunteers who are in the field, so to speak, who are seeing, you know what, we need to have, this is the truth of it. We had the helpline and our volunteers came to us and said, wouldn't it be cool if we had an online community where people could, because our agents are really careful about self-disclosure. We have kind of some rules about that because we want to focus on the client. And yet we found our clients needing to talk and share with someone who had a similar experience. Because our agents face the restriction of, you don't tell your story when you're talking to a client, you listen to them tell their story, but they had that need. And we built the online community from that. And so I didn't even know that when I reached out and wanted to be part of RfR in the first place 10 years ago, whenever it was. And yet it has grown into that because it's had such a natural growth, and it's been from the passion and the compassion that our volunteers show for the clients that are reaching out. Mostly it's because our folks have been through there. They know that feeling. It's true empathy. It's not just cerebral. It's not just, oh, well, this looks like a thing to do. It's because they feel the moment. And so it sounds a little derpity derp, but really and truly, it's my big expression I say is I'm a lawyer in my real life, and I do important lawyer things, and that's awesome. It's very gratifying. Nothing that I have done in my life up to this point, except for raising my children, has given me the amount of gratification that leading this organization has. It's been an absolute joy. It's not without its challenges. It's not without its hard work, but it's been the family of volunteers that RfR is. What it looks like from the outside is exactly what it is on the inside. Helen, I don't know if I even answered your question, but that's what you get when you put me on the spot.
No, like that was fine. I just wanted to get your
Thank
little
you. Thank you
2
for letting
cents
me.
because I love you. I love you and Darrel a lot, and I wanted to hear from both of you since we're talking to volunteers tonight. So that's
Thank you
what
for
I
giving me
wanted.
a chance.
So thank
you,
you.
everybody.